Alright, hello and welcome back to another episode of MC Airsoft. I'm Mark, and today we're going to be talking about the SSG-1. And I know this isn't an SSG-1, I don't have one, I'm not going to buy one, it's not my cup of tea, but we're realistically mostly just talking about the speedsoft kind of paintball gun aesthetic, drop stock, tube foregrip, that kind of thing. So we're talking more about the abstract SSG-1 aesthetic, right, or functionality. So a little bit of clickbait, but whatever. So the thing is, even before, I went in the military, and I played Airsoft before that, and I was playing mostly milsim games. I consider myself more of a milsimmer than a speedsofter. My knees can't handle running that fast or crouching down and moving like that. So I don't consider myself a speedsofter, but I've seen a lot of hate for the SSG-1, and it seems like it's mostly coming from like collectors or milsimmers or things like that. And so I thought I'd share my thoughts on the matter. Now, a little bit of background for why probably I don't care as much as other people, or I'm ready to defend the SSG-1 on some points, and obviously I have my problems on others, but is back in the day when I used to play Airsoft, I had a Classic Army 249 Para. I don't know if it was the 249 specifically, although they all seem to have their issues. Classic Army maybe didn't do a great job with it, whatever. But realistically, I could expect it to break every day that I brought it out. And if we're including the box mag, every game something would have an issue. So on my person, I carried a backup carbine, right? Because I didn't want to be limited when I was out on the field to just a pistol, because I was carrying a 1911 as well, the Tokyo Marine MEU specifically. So I didn't want to be limited to just a pistol in case I couldn't get the saw back up, so I carried a carbine. And what I did, though, is kind of what gives ground for this video. On the saw, I stripped off everything that I didn't absolutely need for functionality, or that would not have been easy to replace, right? So things like the plastic foregrip, I left on, didn't really care. Couldn't very easily take it on and off without breaking it, and didn't actually add much weight. But the bipod, the heat shield, any attachments, the carry handle, literally everything else I got rid of to save weight. I kept the stock on there because I couldn't figure out how to, at that age, I couldn't figure out how to disassemble it and be able to put it back together. And technically, it was my older brother's anyway, so. But he wasn't using it. So then, so I stripped down the saw, and then I took an M4, another Classic Army, I believe, if I remember right. But I took an M4 and I got rid of the stock completely. I know, heresy, right? Got rid of the stock. Didn't think about the spring guide, whatever. I was young. Got rid of the stock entirely. I was running a battery pouch strapped onto the receiver, if I remember right. One of the old, Velcro battery pouches. Replaced the foregrip with the plastic ones, which are much lighter. No muzzle devices. It had its front sight post because it was the old school M4s, not this new crap. No sight, no rear sight, anything else I could do to strip down weight, I did. I think I left a sling plate on there. I know I got rid of the buffer tube. Somehow I was able to mount a sling to it. I don't exactly remember. But essentially, if I had put a drop stock on it, it would have been in the same theme as the SSG-1, right? And that's kind of where I stand on this. Now, I don't think that G&G would have gotten the hate it did if, one, it didn't try a blade trigger, which we'll get to in a second, and two, it had started with a different platform. Someone in the comments section, what inspired this video is Lion Claws, Operation Lion Claws, their Facebook page, put out a picture of a G&G SSG-1 today and was asking, you know, if people still hated it, kind of thing. I can't remember the exact post, but someone put out a picture of a Thompson. And that's kind of weirdly accurate, right? So the Thompson has a lower stock, right? It has an angled down stock. It has a bare bones front end. It has no room for attachments, which, you know, whatever. And it has a pistol mag. But realistically, it's in the same vein of things, right? The SSG-1, aesthetically, very different, but functionality-wise, it's actually pretty similar. Things like AKs. AKs have a dropped stock as well, if we're calling it that, an angled down stock, which, you know, it allows you to put a face, wear your face mask, put your face on the stock, and still be okay with shooting over. And it might take some adjustment. But again, it's got an angled down stock. There's actually quite a few submachine guns, same thing, pistols with stocks, same thing, that have an angled down stock. The only difference is you can't actually adjust them, right? So, it's just, what could they, we'll go over what I like and what I don't like about the SSG-1. First, now the muzzle device is reasonably hated, right? If you like it, you like it, that's cool. It does kind of have a sci-fi or anime kind of aesthetic. If that's your thing, go for it. Honestly, I think they should have just extended the tube out the front end. I actually kind of like the tube. Now, what I think they should have done is, instead of putting rail space on it, just cut it for M-lock, right? Or have, like, Daniel Defense actually makes a very similar front end, mind you shorter, that has holes in it that I believe are cut for M-lock. So if they had just taken that same tube, no Picatinny up top, no monolithic upper or anything crazy, but it just cut it for M-lock, I think it would have been fantastic. Or at least put holes in it and then included rail adapters and just run that front end all the way through the muzzle. Because, to be honest, most milsimmers, they like their muzzle devices anyway. They're going to put something up there. They're going to put a suppressor or a tracer or something up there. So it's kind of the same thing. And if they did do a monolithic upper on the top with a, let's say, carbon fiber foregrip, well, that's basically an Mark 12 Mod 1, right? And they experimented with the early CQBR or Mark 18 rifles with those same style foregrips. So it's not out of the realm of possibility of a real firearm to base it on, right? So a carbon fiber foregrip, now granted they have the barrels running through them, but if you drilled holes for mounting your own rails and you cut the barrel flush to the end of the foregrip, essentially what you've got is a shortened down Mark 12 Mod 1, right? At that point. So moving back, upper and lower, pretty much the same, nothing special. I really like the idea for the magazines. That's great. The trigger. Now, another place I think they piss people off is the blade trigger, but hear me out. I don't care. A blade trigger with nothing else done, is it going to shoot faster than your modded out hair trigger with binary settings from your MOSFET and all of that? Probably not, right? A binary trigger, stupid fast, right? That's kind of the point. Micro switches make your gun shoot faster. So if we want to limit, if we want to say no blade triggers, let's get rid of everything. Let's say no micro switches, or only micro switches with a delay maybe. Let's get rid of binary triggers. Let's get rid of all of it. Because if we're going to say no blade triggers, because you can spam it, right, with 2 or 3 fingers, okay, or you can feather it or whatever the kids are saying nowadays. But what's the difference? And yes, this is cleared out, pointed in a safe direction. But what's the difference between that and... Yes, it's going to be faster, but does that really matter? Right? You're fine. Like, if I can pull the trigger... Now, this also, while having a micro switch, has a mil-spec style pull. It's not, or, airsoft mil-spec, right? My dog is going crazy right now, if you hear that in the background. But there's no point in eliminating blade triggers when if I go replace this with an adjustable hair trigger, because if you see, this still has, let me see if I can get that, still has quite a bit of take up, but having that micro trigger in there means that if you got used to this trigger or upgraded the trigger, you could just spam that and it's fine, especially if you're going binary and the other things, right? So I think it's a little bit hypocritical of the airsoft community to say no blade triggers, but yes to all those other things. Now, from a safety standpoint, I agree with it, right? But I also agree that no binary triggers and none of those other things, right? I think that maybe airsoft as a community should figure out how far the trigger pull has to be, how heavy the trigger pull has to be, something like that. Because if we're going to go down the route of saying no blade triggers, well then who cares? It was more of a novelty thing anyway, or an excuse for G&G to not put all the other fancy things in it. Not saying they couldn't or don't on the other guns, but on this one specifically. So I don't really care about the blade trigger. My only problem with it is the safety issue and the rules bending issue. Now, I'm all for rules bending. I'm all for exploiting loopholes. If they don't say that you can't have 4 LMGs on a squad, screw it, put 4 LMGs on a squad. If they don't say no tracers, put a tracer on it. I'm all for pushing things, right? I'm all for pushing rule sets to make things more efficient, more effective. But I'm not for pushing rule sets that are there for safety reasons, right? The reason that no full auto allowed is because you can pull the trigger, bunch of BBs go down range, they might all hit some kid who's turning a corner in the face, and that's a bad day. Now, feathering, a little bit different, but kind of the same. You're still putting more rounds down range, which in theory is more dangerous. So, but then, like I said, we should look at micro switch triggers, binary triggers, all of those things, and probably get rid of those too if we're going to get rid of blade triggers. Now, aesthetically, blade triggers are stupid. I hate them. They look gross. But that's my opinion. So, yeah. Other than that, replacing pistol grips, don't care. or more ergonomics, great. But then the stock, right? Because that's the other point of contention, right? Is the stock. It's a drop stock. Now, like I said, if they had modeled it on the Thompson or the AK or several other, I believe the Sten submachine gun, several other guns, I don't think the drop stock would have been an issue, right? But the problem is they took an AR, which most people don't realize, or all the people like, oh well, buffer tube. You need a buffer tube. You don't. There are ARs out there that are self-contained. Look at the PDW line, and that's kind of where I'm getting at with that. Is that if you look at it like a PDW, like all the other PDWs on the market with their side folders and things like that, really, I think that's fine, right? If you were, let's say, in the real world, given a PDW and you did not need to conceal it, for whatever reason, it's kind of the point of a PDW, but bear with me, and you didn't need to conceal it, you would want that third point of contact. And having a third point of contact that maybe follows your shoulder so you can get around barricades, you can get up and over barricades, limited exposure targets, maybe it's not a terrible idea. Like I said, it's a very specific class of ARs that does that with the buffer built into the receiver platform, so it can have it over in some way, whether it's up on the piston system or back here in the receiver. It's a very specific gun, but having a folding stock. And the other thing too is on the fields that allow you to not shoulder your rifle, you could just get rid of that thing. And then you've got a little stubby end. The problem is then where's your battery storage, and you have to figure that out. But just get rid of it and then it's fine. And honestly, if I felt the need for like a PDW build, it's not a bad place to start, right? Taking off the stock, because, well, PDWs don't need stocks, they have folding stocks, they have that kind of thing. And then running and then drilling my own holes, taking off the flash hider, which is, again, I think is ugly, drilling my own holes, mounting my own rail attachments. I think it'd actually be a fairly decent rifle. And if you do that to the front end, or you just buy a front end and replace the rear end with a stock more like this, I don't really think that'd be much of an issue, right? Honestly, call it a Mark 18 early variant, call it a short Mark 12 mod 0, whatever the case is. If I was saying Mark 1 earlier, I was wrong. It's Mark 0. But with the carbon fiber barrel, which honestly Daniel Defense makes a version of it, but also, like I was saying, can't remember who makes the actual ones from the Mark 12, but there is a carbon fiber tube rail system for the Mark 12s. Putting one of those on here and maybe getting rid of the stock, putting a folding stock, or maybe even putting a folding stock that has kind of a downward angle, that would make this essentially the same as an SSG-1, right? Provided I upgrade the trigger and all of that stuff. But really, I don't see much of a difference. And maybe that's just me. In fact, it is just me, but then again, you're watching my videos. So, yeah, I think that there are some issues, and one of those being legal issues. So the SSG-1 is not really based on a real firearm, kinda. Like I said, it has some similarities, but Right now in Canada, there's the issue of they're trying to make anything that looks like a real gun. To my understanding, not a lawyer, not in Canada. Go look into it further. They're trying to make any like firearms replicas illegal. So essentially, we'd be left with Nerf-looking guns, kind of thing. From my understanding, I don't actually know. But based on what I've seen and read and listened to, that's the gist of it, is that they would be left with Nerf-looking guns. Now, for those of you in other countries, like here in America, why should we care about Canada? Well, it's for the same reason that I remember back in the day being able to pick up a Airsoft gun down at Walmart. You know, granted, they were crap, don't get me wrong, but that's how I started in Airsoft, is I got, you know, the little spring M9 kind of thing. Then there were some other guns that I bought from Walmart. All of them were crap. But at the time, that's what got me into Airsoft, right? Is seeing those things. I think I was looking for like Nerf or laser tag or something like that. And me and my brother saw Airsoft, asked our parents to buy them. They did, great. We actually wore safety glasses from a fairly early age, pretty much as soon as we started shooting at each other. So that was never really an issue. Yeah, so that's what got me into it. But now looking at the shelves in Walmart, they're gel blasters. Why? Because it is theoretically at least a safer alternative, and it's been proven to work in Australia. So it's not a far stretch to think that if Canada says no replica firearms like this, it's not a far stretch to think that maybe the US or other countries would follow suit one day. And so that's kind of an issue I have with the SSG-1, is because if we keep producing real firearm looking airsoft replicas, then chances are we're going to be able to prove that like we have no issue. And if you take away our guns, the market dies, right? If you take away our realistic looking guns, market dies, right? So if we start coming out with more and more of these spacey guns or speedsoft specific guns, there might be a day that no airsoft guns are allowed. So that is something to consider as well. But overall, and it's something, if I start going to the CQB fields more, maybe I'll throw together. But if you take a base AR, PDW stock, carbon fiber tube handguard, flush cut muzzle device, there's not really much of a difference between that and an SSG. And honestly, if I saw that at a milsim, I would assume, early special forces kind of gun, right? Because it was. So that's something to think about, right? Is, yes, the muzzle device, it's ugly. Yes, the trigger being a blade trigger is ugly and kind of rules breaking, or finding another way around it, but so are a lot of other things. Drop stock, I think they should have just attached it coming out the bottom here. But if they had done a normal stock and put a 416 rail with a riser in there, I think it would have been fine, right? I think that you would have had the height over bore that you need, or height over stock in this case, that you need to get your mask down on the stock. But you would also have the ability to look down the sights. if it came with the 416 rail upper, which sits a little bit higher, and in-box rails, rail adapters, I think it would have been fine. And another thing to think about is, yes, is it immersion braking? Like, would I want to see one on a milsim field? No, because it is not a military weapon. It's not really even a real life weapon, and the point of those are immersion. Point of milsims are for immersion's sake, right? But I would also argue anyone wearing a paintball mask, anyone wearing lower face protection that is not like a halo kit, halo rebreather, which why you're wearing those when you're walking around, whatever. Any kind of lower face protection that is more than just a balaclava or whatever, however you say, the ski mask looking tactical ski mask ninja thing, schmog, something of that nature, that's not realistic either. That is immersion braking as well, in the same vein as the SSG-1, because it is airsoft specific gear. Now, I'm not going to tell anyone not to take off their face mask. I don't think that the SSG-1 should be used at milsims, but it is still an AR, it is still an airsoft gun. It works. There are plenty of other things that, because of airsoft, like I, on deployment, never wore I have revision goggles, the big black ones that you put to your helmet for dust storm kind of things. I never wore those. I wore sunglasses. I never wore the goggles though. Even though I had the tinted lenses, I never saw anyone else, unless they were making fun of the goggles, wearing goggles. So I mean, unless you're riding around in a Humvee or a helicopter, it doesn't really make sense anyway. Or maybe a dust storm, but I never really had issues with that, just wearing my normal sunglasses. And so if you're wearing anything airsoft specific, then you don't really have a leg to stand on when it comes to arguing against the SSG-1 from an aesthetic standpoint. Now again, safety is safety, but yeah. But I'm going to wrap it up there. If anyone puts any good comments down in the comments section, or has any other opinions on the matter, whatever like that, I might readdress this in a later video, but we're going on 28 minutes, so I'm going to end it there. So until next time, stay safe and stay hydrated.